The smaller the living space, the narrower the thinking. Written by Xuefeng. The more difficult life becomes for people, the more they ought to pursue a heavenly-like way of living. Yet the reality is, the harder life gets, the more people seem to rush toward hell. There's a saying, poverty limits the imagination. From my observations, one's living space is closely related to one's thinking. The smaller the living space, the narrower the thinking, and the poorer the imagination. Narrow thinking and poor imagination, in turn, further limit people's living space, creating a vicious cycle that drives life ever closer to a hellish state. The poorer people are, the more intense their competition and struggles with each other become. Evolution is in essence the cruel and deadly infighting among the poor, where in the end everyone loses and there's no winners. It is not that heaven does not exist, it is that people do not seek it. Lifechanyuan's second home model of production and living has for 20 years presented humanity with a magnificent and happy vision of heaven on earth. Yet very few people have sought it. People would rather spend their time, energy, and money on short-term gains than devote them to long-term benefits. Those who do not seek heaven cannot even plan their own lives well, without the yearning for and pursuit of a heavenly life, no matter who one is, be it a high-ranking official, a learned scholar, or a billionaire, one is still just a transient, mediocre passerby, not a winner in life. The so-called successful who do not seek heaven differ from the poor and destitute who do not seek heaven only in being fat versus thin. In terms of life's value and meaning, there's no essential difference. When we observe people at the lower rungs of society struggling to survive, we find that their greatest problem is that their living space is far too small. First, the people they know and communicate with are limited, even if the group they interact with, say a WeChat group, has dozens of hundreds of members. Their cognitive level is generally the same, making it impossible to break free from habitual thinking or achieve any leap in understanding. Even when they are completely wrong, they are firmly convinced and they are right. They never stop to consider, if my life has always been full of trouble, pain, anxiety, and struggle, how can my way of thinking be correct? Second, people in the lower strata of society are confined to limited living areas. They cannot step outside of the regions they are used to and familiar with. The actions already warned. A tree that is moved will die, but a person who moves will live. Constantly changing one's living environment sparks a series of inner changes. Thinking becomes more open and expansive, and one discovers more ways and paths to live. But long-term attachment to a single place or a single kind of work leads to rigidity. Over time, one loses adaptability, and when change inevitably comes, one feels lost and helpless. Life will never remain unchanged, and ways of living are always shifting. Yet, among all forms of change, there is one way of life that is eternal. That is the heavenly life. Once you enter the heavenly life, you say goodbye forever to worry, pain, anxiety, and sorrow. If you do not enter the heavenly life, no matter how you toss and struggle, work hard, or compete, even if you become a top official or a wealthy magnate, you cannot escape trouble and fear. Recently in China, people have been saying that the middle class has become impoverished, crushed by mortgage payments, car loans, and the costs of children's education. This is a change in circumstances. I want to ask, when you were at a middle class level, why didn't you pursue the heavenly life? If when you were middle class, you had chosen, as Chanyuan celestials do, not to buy a house or a car, and even not to marry or start a family, would your situation not be entirely different now? As I look upon those in the lower strata of society, worrying every day about food, clothing, shelter, transportation, health, and death, I feel deep compassion and sympathy, and also boundless regret. They have fallen into life's curse. Their fixed thinking, binding them tightly in the prison of despair. I watch as they sink step by step into the mire of hell, yet I'm powerless to help. For heaven helps those who help themselves. If they do not seek heaven, but spend every day merely running about for survival, how can they possibly break free from the constraints of the mortal programs?